important to you here. It says, great Catholics were crucial to America's founding, yet they were downgraded by most historians who never spoke their names. It says, thanks to an independent historian, Dan LeRoy, who gets right to the point, the primary goal of this book is to gather together in one place and for the first time the significant contributions of Catholics to the American Revolution. The veteran writer researcher does this in 12 chapters that flow like a screenplay and makes his electrifying case. Catholics did something more remarkable than just support the patriot cause they helped to lead. Dan, are you there?
I'm here.
Praise be to God. All right, that's way better. Right. So I was trying to give while we were trying to get you connected by phone, I was getting everybody the backdrop on the sort of the pre-war era. Let's, since sake of time, 2 minutes to break here. Going up to the war, who were the major players from a Catholic perspective?
One of the major players is mentioned in Liberty's Lions, and that's Charles Carroll of Carrollton. He's from Maryland. He's one of the richest men in America, but he's also one of the smartest men in America. He is the founding father. He's the only Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence, by the way. But he is the only founder who sees clearly 10 years before the Revolution, certainly much sooner than any other founder, that revolution is not only inevitable, but that it is something that the colonies can actually win. And a large part of that is due to his Catholic faith. He understands this from a perspective of being a persecuted Catholic. He understands it from a perspective of Catholics who are seeking religious liberty in the colonies and who realize that the colonies have become something different than America. They're no longer bound exclusively by English law and English custom. They've created something different. They've created something that is friendly, potentially, to Catholics. And it's why Charles Carroll of Carrollton saw very clearly that revolution was on the horizon. And again, he saw this before any of the other founders.
Do you think there was a sentiment among Catholics, as I mentioned when we were connecting you, that this was a time when in England they were still hunting priests down and persecuting priests? So was there a sentiment among Catholics in America to say, yes, let's definitely put off the shackles of merry old England so that we might have freedom?
Well, I think there's some of that, but don't forget that they were hunting down some priests in the colonies, too.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, the promise of religious liberty was something that was often more theoretical than practical. On balance, I think what you say has some truth to it, that it's kind of the case of the devil you know. That is, everyone had seen what it was like in England, where there are less than 1% of people who claim to be Catholics by this point.
All right, hold that thought. Our country was founded by a lot of big names that we all know and love these days, but a lot of people don't realize how connected these people were through Freemasonry and the Masonic Lodge. How about the Catholics? I mean, it's against church teaching to be a participant of these organizations. So how do the Catholics fit into a group of people that were connected like this through these Masonic lodges? How do they cooperate with them at all?
Well, one way they cooperated with them is they, in some cases, like the case of Daniel Carroll, they actually joined the Masonic lodges against church teaching, and that certainly caused a lot of people, including Daniel Carroll's brother, Father John Carroll, who was the first Catholic bishop and later first Catholic archbishop in America, caused him a lot of consternation.
I can imagine.
But outside of that, as far as what the founders thought of these Catholics, it really kind of ranges on a continuum. You have some folks, familiar names, as you say, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, Samuel Adams, who are pretty overtly anti-Catholic, and we do have them on the record about that. Then you have folks like John Adams, who seem to be very puzzled by Catholicism. Then you have folks like Benjamin Franklin, who are at least circumspect about what they may or may not believe regarding Catholicism. The guy who really stands out, though, among all the founders is George Washington. That's why he gets his own chapter in Liberty's Lions. George Washington is a guy who is not just tolerant of Catholics in word, but also in deed. Example would be in 1775 when he takes over the Continental Army. There's a tradition throughout the Northeast called Pope's Night. It sounds like a fun Catholic evening, but it really isn't. It's actually a very anti-Catholic event that allows people to get drunk in public and burn the Pope in effigy.
Wow.
When Washington takes over as commander-in-chief, he says, look, we're going to put the kibosh on this because we cannot expect our fellow citizens who are Catholic to join our cause if we're going to insult them publicly in this way. And he does put the kibosh on it. And Catholics always remembered that Washington wasn't just a guy who talked the talk, but also walked the walk. So Washington, while a lot of Catholics would like to claim him as a secret Catholic, I don't know that the evidence really backs that up. But one thing that the book does try to prove is Washington, I think, was far more than this very disinterested deist who really wasn't that interested in religion, didn't have any particular beliefs. I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest the contrary. So Washington, among the founders, is unique in that way.
Would you say John Adams and obviously Thomas Jefferson, they were more of the deist and sort of disinterested type of founding fathers?
I think that's probably true. There's a lot of examples of that. Jefferson's Bible, where he cut and pasted all the parts that he liked and got rid of the stuff that he didn't. We have a lot of correspondence between the two of them that suggests this. On the other hand, we'll give John Adams some credit. Although he was fairly skeptical, later on after the Revolution, he becomes one of the subscribers that helps build the first Catholic church in Boston. So he at least, if nothing else, extended the financial hand there.
How did these found, like George Washington or the Continental Congress, most of which weren't Catholic, as we know, but how did they look at the savior of the Revolution in many ways, which was the French? If without the French Navy in particular, George Washington would have likely been lost in his cause. So how did they look upon the French being so Catholic prior to the French Revolution, of course, and yet still hold some anti-Catholic sentiments?
Well, there's a great quote, speaking of founders who were fairly anti-Catholic. There's a great quote from Alexander Hamilton toward the end of the war when things are still hanging in the balance. And he writes in a letter, and I'm paraphrasing, but only a little. He says, "Oh, God, if we're going to be saved, it's going to be the French and the Spanish who are going to have to save us." And he was right about that. That's exactly the way it turned out, that the French and the Spanish were the saviors. One of the things that's interesting, though, is to go back to the whole reason about why Catholics and their contributions in the Revolution are kind of downgraded. The numbers will tell you that during the colonial period, there are 24 to 30,000 Catholics in the colonies at the time. It's less than 2%, and not all of them were patriots. So if you look at the raw numbers, you will say, well, how significant a contribution could this tiny percentage of people make? That's wrong on one level, because out of that small group of people came some of the most extraordinary leaders of the Revolution. But when you figure in the foreign contributions, when you figure in, as you say, the French military presence, the Spanish, the Polish, the Germans, there's an estimate in the book, and it's probably never going to be confirmed, but I think there's a lot of historical accuracy behind it that suggests that as many as 70% of the soldiers who fought on the side of liberty were Catholic.
Wow.
Now, once you do the math there, it gives you a very different picture to what we're used to hearing about the Revolution and the Catholic part in it.
Were there stories about Catholic Protestant infighting within the Revolution or Continental Army?
I don't think there's a lot of it. There's less than you would think. Given the history, and we're talking again 150 years of history, in some cases prior to this in the colonies. There are certainly cases of Catholic and Protestant infighting all throughout the colonies, in particular in Maryland and Pennsylvania, two colonies which were kind of founded on the promise of religious liberty. But once the Revolution starts, everybody seems to more or less have adopted a pretty practical mindset. There is a common enemy here. There's a bigger goal, and religious infighting is going to have to take a back seat. And as proof of that, the only two places in the colonies where you could say a public mass prior to the Revolutionary War, those being Old St. Joseph's Church in Philadelphia and right down the street, Old St. Mary's. Some of the founders did worship there, including Washington, including John Adams. And there was actually at Old St. Mary's, which is the bigger church, there was a service held after the victory at Yorktown. So people were able, I think, to put some of these differences aside. Certainly didn't solve all the problems, but you don't have a lot of reports of this kind of infighting that you're talking about. And again, I think it's because the bigger goal was such a huge goal, such a goal that demanded everybody's full attention, that kind of stuff really got swept under the rug, I believe, in most cases.
Dan LeRoy is our guest. His book is Liberty's Lions, The Catholic Revolutionaries Who Established America, published by Sophia Institute Press. You can find it at sophiainstitute.com. I'm going to be picking up a copy. I'm very intrigued by this book. I haven't read it, but it's my kind of book, let's just say. What about, we have about 4 minutes left in our conversation with you, Dan. What about the post-Revolutionary War? Once we have established that we have independence, we've successfully ousted the British Army from America. What was the relationship like with Catholics at that point? Did things go back to sort of the colonial days where there was tension again, or did we move forward with a new foot?
We actually did both. The post-revolutionary period is a period of fairly calm relations between Catholics and Protestants. Catholics had won the respect in a lot of cases of their fellow Protestants, and Catholics post-war are starting on the very big project of building an American Catholic Church, and that's largely the work of Father John, later Bishop John Carroll. Things don't start to become really tense again until the demographic in America changes a little bit later in the 19th century. Once we start to see immigration really transform the face of the church and transform the face of our country, that's when you see a lot of the tensions return with the rise of groups like the Know Nothings in the middle of the 19th century. And, assimilating all of those folks from Italy, from Ireland, was a big, big job, and it certainly did create its share of tensions. Immediately following the revolution, though, things really were as calm and peaceful as anybody had a right to expect that they would be following what had just occurred.
Have you ever read John Spaulding's The Church of Liberty and the Culture? It is an incredible work.
I've not.
I think he wrote it in the late 19th century, and it talks about the anti-Catholic sentiment in our country at that time, just to kind of hit on what you just said. It's a great book. It's one of my prized books in my library, and I would recommend it for sure. But we have just about 2 minutes left. I want to ask, what was the standout character in your book? What was like the one Catholic character in your book that you wanted to bring the most attention to?
My favorite character in the book is probably Adrian de Lafayette, the wife of the Marquis de Lafayette. As it says in the book, if there's a saint anywhere in the book, it's probably her. She never set foot on American soil. So in one case, you'd say, how is she a revolutionary? She made all the things that Lafayette did possible.
Wow.
She's an extraordinary woman who took her children with her after the French Revolution to spend 2 years in prison with her husband because she did not want their family to be separated. And Lafayette, by his own admission, was not a great Catholic, not a great Christian, but she never stopped fighting for his soul right up until she was on her deathbed. We don't know whether she was successful, but she was certainly a heroic figure who never stopped, just like St. Monica.
Well, we're out of time. We are out of time. You're going to have to buy the book to see how it ends, I guess. Pick it up. It's Liberty's Lions, The Catholic Revolutionaries Who Established America by Dan LeRoy, published by Sophia Institute Press, sophiainstitute.com. Dan, thank you for your time today. We're very grateful.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
All right. God bless you and God love you. And that is going to do it for hour number 1 of Catholic Drive Time. Join us in the second hour. We have a game show to play and new prizes involved this week. grnonline.com/CDT. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Central, 7 Eastern for Catholic Drive Time.
Thank you for joining us on Your Catholic Drive Time. where it is our pleasure to keep you informed and inspired.
Join us Monday through Friday at the same time, right here on your favorite Catholic radio station.
Don't forget to connect with us. Just go to facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Again, that's facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Be sure to share more than just us today. Share Jesus with everyone you meet.
Bye now, and God love you.